So this is experiment number 10, which is implementation of bot for a simple medical diagnosis application. So aim of this experiment is to create a chatbot that assists users with basic medical diagnosis by analyzing symptoms and providing probable conditions using rule-based logic and NLP techniques. So in this, we use chatbot with both rule-based logic and NLP techniques as well. So the programming language we use here is Python, and we'll use Flask here for web development interface, and Hugging Face transformers for NLP based diagnosis, SQLite for storing user interactions. So step one here is install all libraries. So install library, yeah. So first we'll install Flask transformers, torch of Quite. Then step two is imports. Yeah, then we'll import all the things necessary here. We'll import OS, SQLite. We'll import Flask, request, tender, template string. Then pipeline. Then from run simple, we'll import run simple. Then in step 3 is database setup. So here we'll set up the database required for the chatbot using SQLite. Yeah, then here task 1 is to input symptoms and get diagnosis. Yeah, so in task 1 we'll give symptoms. Here it's like fever, flu or viral infection, cough, cold, respiratory infection, headache, migraine, stress. We'll give all the symptoms here. Okay, then we'll define a function is define get diagnosis of these symptoms. For symptoms, diagnosis is symptoms of items. If symptom is symptoms dot lower, return diagnosis, return consult a medical professional. Yeah, then medical NLP. In this pipeline, it is zero shot classification model, facebook.bark.large MNLI. Then we'll define of get diagnosis NLP. The earlier one was using rule based and this one is using NLP. Okay, in which NLP will give labels such as flu, cold, migraine, food poisoning, anemia, pneumonia, COVID-19, tonsillitis, arthritis, and everything. So result equal to medical NLP symptoms, candidate label equal to labels, return result of label of 0. Symptoms is input entire symptoms, rule is get diagnosis of symptoms, and you will print diagnosis research symptoms, rule based for rule based. You will print all of these things, and and you will get this output. So task 2 is to store symptoms and diagnosis in SQLite. So we define store data. Basically, we use SQLite here to store it in file format. Yeah, so we'll connect SQLite3.connect medical diagnosis v2dv connect.execute. Then we will use database commands here, SQL commands here, insert into diagnose symptoms, diagnose values, symptoms, diagnosis. Yeah. Then we will commit it and then we'll close it. Symptoms equal to input enter symptoms, in which we need to enter symptoms. The diagnosis equal to flu hash or remove NLP result. Store data symptoms of print data stored successfully. So you will get the output as first you have to enter the symptoms and it will give output as data stored successfully. So the task 3 is to show stored data from databases. For that we'll define show of history for showing the past history of these things. So we'll connect SQLite3.connect medical diagnosis v2 of DB, cursor equal to CNN.connect, and then at last we'll print diagnosis tree for row in rows, print these things, then we'll show history. So it will show the history there, diagnosis history, and it will show ID number, symptoms, and diagnosis. Okay. Then task 4 is to complete medical diagnosis code. import OS, import SQLite, from Flask, import Flask, Tender, template string, transformers, import pipeline. Then from workzoom serving, import run simple, connect.sim, SQL3 connect, simple diagnosis v2db, c1.execute. Then you inside that you use SQL commands for creating a table if it does not exist. For that we have a command create table if not exist diagnosis ID integer primary key. It is a primary key because it is a unique ID here, and symptoms dot comma text and diagnosis text because both of these columns we have here is as text. Then we'll close it. That is C1 dot close. Then symptoms of inside the diagnosis symptoms, you will give all the symptoms. Fever. For fever, we have symptoms like flu or viral. For cough, symptoms. We'll give disease, then colon and the symptoms we have for that, and then we'll close it. Then we define get diagnosis of symptoms. After that, we'll close everything. Then we'll do for diagnosis and history for the everything like the other one. Then after ending, we'll come into a web page as medical diagnosis board, in which there would be a rectangular column. Inside that we need to give our symptoms there, and there is a button for diagnose, and if we click that, we'll get our symptoms, and it can also show diagnosis history.